We have a company that we invested in that's actually treating addiction. The US government funded it. An incredible founder out of Sydney came up with a neurostimulation device which you can wear as a headband that actually treats ADHD. A great invention, a great innovation takes 10 years to gestation. We live in a time where people want things to happen really fast and people want to create overnight success. I regard 10 years as overnight success.
Thank you, Guy, for receiving our invitation and coming for Beyond Last Year's.
Fantastic. Nice to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. So today we have Guy Hedley from Stoic Venture Capital.
Yes.
And I just wanted to ask about the company name, the behind philosophy. Why did you...
Sure.
Why is it Stoic? And is it like kind of a mindset to encourage your founders or within your own team?
Yeah, so thank you. So my partner who set the business up with me originally, Dr. Jeff Waring, was a Stoic fanatic, as am I. Mm-hmm. So I think if you understand Stoicism, it sets down some very basic principles around how to lead your life. But most importantly, it teaches you how to deal with the pressures of the environment you're operating in. So Stoics were very, very good about, stress about things you can control, mm-hmm. Don't stress about things you can't. And when you get to venture capital, those sort of lessons are absolutely incredibly important because quite often with venture, you'll be backing founders who are going to go on their own journey. Mm-hmm. And you need to be there to support them, but you also need to be there to guide them and make sure that they don't fall over on the wrong things. So I found the lessons of Stoicism really incredibly important in how we've actually addressed our venture business.
Mm-hmm. For a Stoic, it's all about like backing cutting edge science and engineering.
Sure.
When you talk about human health, computer power, or making like Earth healthier again, what's one specific area where you see a huge breakthrough just around the corner,
sure.
Thanks to today's research?
Sure. So I think neuroscience is probably an area that myself and a number of my partners are passionate about because the brain is one of the last things for people to solve. Mm-hmm. There's been a huge amount of innovation and drug discovery around things like cancer, other illnesses, and really in neuroscience there's been very little progress made. So I think we're seeing with a number of our investee companies the potential to really change that. Whether it's from drug discovery, we have a company that we invested in that's actually treating addiction. And the US government funded it in to treat opioid addiction, which is such a massive problem over there. Mm-hmm. And we worked out along the way that the drug probably works just as well to treat alcohol addiction or tobacco addiction or any addiction. But also we've got a little company that was set up by an incredible founder out of Sydney here, 28-year-old female from Sydney University, who has ADHD and decided she wanted to find a non-drug way to deal with ADHD. Mm-hmm. And came up with a neurostimulation device, which you can wear as a headband, that actually treats ADHD without having to take drugs. So when I look at that sort of that innovation that's occurring in that space, it's so cool and potentially world-changing.
It's not always like butterflies and rainbows. Sometimes it
Sure.
Failure is kind of part of the journey.
Yeah.
So how do you stand by the founders when you have like bumps and challenges when they go through them?
Again, it's back to the Stoicism thing. So normally if you're a young innovator or you've come up with a great invention, you'd like to think that the journey is a smooth journey. Mm-hmm. The reality is for those of us who've been around a long time, it never is. So quite often the best thing you need to do or practice with founders is just that discipline of if you get knocked down, get back up. I call it adversity quotient, which is, if you can handle adversity, you can handle anything in life. Mm-hmm. If you're a founder, your journey will be full of frustration, it'll be full of roadblocks. It's just about keeping your eye on the end game mm-hmm. and not allowing those roadblocks and those things you hit along the way to stop you and knock you off course. So really, I think as a partner with our founders, that's our skill, is just reminding them that you had a vision, mm-hmm. Don't lose it. If you hit a roadblock, it's a roadblock. It's not the end of the journey. And I think that approach, serves really, really well, particularly with younger people who don't have that experience around adversity.
Kind of like seeing it as a learning opportunity.
It's a learning opportunity. I worked at Macquarie Group for a long time, and we always worked on the principle that if you make a mistake, it's not failure as long as you learn from it. Mm-hmm. Even if you make a mistake twice, as long as you can walk away saying, I learned from it, And I think that's the most critical thing for young people looking to create great businesses is just recognize that you're going to hit failure along the way. But it's not the end of the journey. You need to get back up, dust yourself off and keep going. And I tell all our founders that if you take nothing away from your journey, it is that when you look back at it, how you dealt with adversity will determine your character in the future.
From the investment side, when the project fails, what is the biggest thing that you learned? Like, do you have any example, like real life example that you had the biggest?
Yeah, look, I mean, we do. I mean, I'll give you a really interesting example. So one of our investee companies was doing robotic agriculture. So it was effectively a very, very clever innovator, engineer out of Sydney University, came up with a way to actually design robots that would go up and down crops and weed and spray. Pretty simple stuff, right? And he developed software that would allow it to identify what was a weed and what wasn't a weed and where to spray and what not to spray. Incredible technology, incredible innovation. The problem was it actually required a big capital investment in robots, in farming robots. Now, as a founder, he had a passion for an integrated product that was both software and hardware. He was determined to go down that journey. We couldn't see that journey was going to work because for us, just being really focused on it, the software was what differentiated the product, not the hardware. Hardware can be built in multiple markets at a cheaper price. So we were adamant that for us to stay on the journey with him, we needed him to actually step away from his vision of an integrated product and just focus on the software. In the end, we both agreed to part ways. It failed, but if I look at that and look at the lessons and the learns from that, it could have been a global success. He still has the software. It could still be a global success, but it requires reframing on his side in order to prosecute that.
So for venture capitals, it is very much for quick returns. However, for Stoic, it's you go for the longer run.
Sure. Well, I just work again. If you're going to go into venture, you've got to understand. I call 10-year cycles. A great invention, a great innovation takes 10 years to gestation, and I think it's unrealistic for people. We live in a time where people want things to happen really fast, and people want to create overnight success. I regard 10 years as overnight success, because you just need to take that time frame. If you're selling a business within that 10-year time frame, you really need to ask yourself the question, am I selling it too early? Now, there'll be exceptions to the rule, something that's just stunning technology that somebody else is prepared to pay an egregious price for. But normally, it's going to take you that sort of time period, 8-10 years, to take your invention, your innovation through to a successful exit. And, for young founders, that's quite a hard message to hear often. But I think, for us, it's really important to remind them.
So how do you value or know the worth of the companies that is a long-term,
Yeah, part of it's, again, science. Part of it's is just gut feel. You can sort of see by, companies, particularly when you're dealing with founders, they'll set themselves some very ambitious goals. I mean, I always find people come to me and say, look, I've got this great invention, this great innovation, and this is what I'm going to do. I want you to come in as a seed stage investor. I'm going to commercialize it. I'm going to create great success. You ask them for their revenue projections on their invention or whatever they're doing. I can guarantee you it looks like a hockey stick. It'll be a couple of years of hard slog with no revenue. Revenue will kick in maybe the third year, and then it just goes off the scale. And so that's not reasonable to think like that. Businesses don't get created where everything goes from bottom left to top right. It's always going to be a bumpy journey. And so what we're looking for is, again, realism in the way that revenue line's getting built, understanding that there are going to be all sorts of inflection points along the way, and then finding founders who can actually buy into that vision. Because if you can't buy into the reality of the journey that you're about to unfold on, chances are it's not going to work, because your own internal drive will say, I'm supposed to be here on the hockey line, I'm not there. So you view that as a failure, and quite often they'll force them to change direction. It's amazing how many companies would come to us saying, I've got this vision, okay, buy into the vision, and then they'll come back 6 months later and say, my vision's changed. I now want to go down this direction, this direction. So you call it style drift, and it's one of the most debilitating things that can happen in a new venture.
When it comes to there are a lot of huge problems in the world, but when it comes to investing, what kind of problems do you want to solve and how do you see them? And most important, is there any secret checklist that you go through?
We're very privileged because all we're really doing is, our skill is to identify and back those that we think are going to be most successful. And there are plenty of people that we won't have backed who will turn out to be successful. You don't always get it right. I think that the gems would be that people who have a realism around the journey they're about to embark on and also are looking to address a really big problem. Quite often, I see a lot of stuff in AI and people are telling me, oh, this is going to do this and this and this and this. But when I say to them, what's the problem you're solving? That's when it gets much harder, because if you look at what they're trying to do, there'll be a lot of other people trying to do the same thing. What we like is that those vacant spaces where, there might be one or two people actually setting out to do the same stuff, but not many. And a great example, one that we're not yet settled on yet, is brain-computer interface. Again, back to neuroscience. Elon Musk is progressing his Neuralink brain-computer interface. There are other companies. There's another company in Melbourne that's doing a similar sort of approach to brain-computer interface. We see that technology as being revolutionary. You could ask the same thing with quantum computing. We've looked at quantum computing, and there are a number of players on the field. When quantum computing gets solved, it will be revolutionary for everybody, right? Forget about AI. This will be next level revolution, but trying to work out how to back a winner in a field that is unproven is really, really hard. So again, a big part of due diligence is, in that case, we've backed a company that's solving a problem in quantum computing called quantum error correction. If you understand quantum, one of the biggest problems is it's because there's no such thing as solid state, a 0-1 can be 1-0 in the same time. There's an enormous amount of errors that get put out in quantum. This company came up with a way to actually use algorithms to actually make sure that the errors that go through quantum are lower. Now, we're prepared to back that technology because we see that sooner or later quantum's going to get solved as a problem. It's going to be revolutionary. We're not quite sure which quantum technology is going to succeed, but we do know that everyone's facing the same problem of error correction. So again, it's just about doing your homework and then trying to back technologies that you know are solving a big problem, but also one that everybody else isn't necessarily sitting on the bandwagon with, or it's impossible to work out whether a particular technology is going to win through.
With this fast-growing environment, it is very important but to see the value of the company, because there are many companies, many founders who are doing the same thing at the same time.
Sure.
But in my understanding, you were talking a lot about the vision of the founder. Is it very important of the idea innovation itself or the vision the founder?
So that's a really good question. So and quite often with particularly with research coming out of universities, you think about drug discovery. There's a very big difference between somebody who's a scientist who comes up with a novel approach to drug discovery and then taking that discovery through to commercialization and exit. They're very different skill sets. If I'm a phenomenal scientist who comes up with a way to cure cancer, it doesn't mean I'm actually the right person to take that company to exit. So one of the really big balancing acts between a founder and how they actually deal with their invention is their willingness to acknowledge the fact that swim in your lane. For a scientist, focus on your core technology. Then get a leader in who can actually take the business out and sell the business down the track. And quite often we see failures occur because there's that blurred line between somebody who's an innovator and inventor who's not prepared to give up the reins to somebody who can actually help them successfully commercialize that opportunity.
Mm-hmm. If we see it in a bigger picture, for Australia, for example, like government rules and policies are very important to break like a deep tech ventures. From your point of view, how do you see Australia's current setup? And what's one or two things that you want to change?
Okay, a lot. No, in fairness, I mean, one of the great gifts Australia has, it's collaborative environment. So, we work with 10 universities and CSIRO in a very collaborative fashion. We all sit on the same investment committee. One university coming up with a great idea will get backed by other universities. Globally, that's quite unique. Mm-hmm. If you go into the US market or the UK market or Europe, what you'll tend to find is universities get very possessive. And so as a result, there isn't that collaboration that occurs. So as a result, they miss out on a lot of opportunity. I think I've said this previously in other forums. Australia ranks number 6 in the OECD in terms of research. Phenomenal, right? Given we're a country of 24 million people. But when it comes to commercializing and innovation, we're much lower on the scales. So I think part of that is that distance. We're a long way away from the big markets. And so to shift technology from Australia into the US or Europe is much harder than if you're actually sitting in those markets when it's invented. There is a luxury that comes from the Australian government giving a lot of non-dilutive funding to companies. It's both a benefit and a risk because it creates potentially a culture where it's easier for a company to sit in Australia and take a lot of government grants and non-dilutive funding, as opposed to step out into the real world and have to rely upon commercial capital. So that's a balancing act. What would I like to see happen? What I'd like to see happen is just a greater focus from the government about promoting the quality of the research product that's coming out of Australian universities. There is no reason why we rank so high on global independent measures, and yet the promotion of that ranking is so low. Everybody talks about when educational institution rankings come out about, this university is ranked number X on the scale globally and all that, but nobody's talking about the fact that our research output from all that investment being made in tertiary education is so high. So I guess we'd like to see more of that, just a general awareness of the quality of Australia, but also greater support for companies to actually get out there on the global stage. And I think that's where the Australian government has a huge opportunity. It just needs to grab it and run with it.
Mm-hmm. You were talking about we are very far from the big markets. For example, for Wholesale Investor, we do events in Dubai, Europe, and everywhere else, in Singapore as well. And we noticed a different interest from different countries as well. So which market are you most interested in, and which market do you want to step into?
Sure. So the US market for drug discovery, and generally speaking, for anything in health, the US market is without a doubt the place where everybody's heading and where everyone has historically headed. It's interesting recently that there's a bit of a change to that. I've had a lot of experience operating in the China market with different businesses I've run over the years. There's some recent research out that shows that China is actually now leading the world in terms of drug discovery and biotechnology. And why is that? It's because the culture of Chinese innovation historically has been replication. So take an existing drug or an existing technology and work out how to actually repurpose it and reuse it. But what it has created is a huge culture of investment in research. And I think also perhaps because China is such a big market, it's created an offtake for those inventions or those innovations. So I think what you'll see in the next 5 to 10 years is the Chinese market will become way more important for Australian companies looking to commercialize their research, whereas now people's general focus seems to be on the US market and then Europe. I've just got a sneaking suspicion that China will enter into that equation and potentially dominate it, particularly with what we're seeing happen in the US healthcare system, where it's in a little bit of state of disequilibrium at the moment with a lot of chopping and changing. Obviously the US university system's under a reasonable amount of attack. previously very stable research programs are not quite so stable anymore, all of which speaks to a fantastic opportunity for Australian research to get out on the global stage, and also an opportunity for us to start to collaborate with other markets.
For like founder listening to
Sure.
our series today, like if their projects are still in the lab or just starting their journey, what's one piece of practical advice you would like to give them about preparing themselves?
Okay, the most important thing is make sure that you've got a good team around you, and it doesn't need to be a big team. It just needs to be a very good team. Quite often, so we run monthly investment committee meetings with the universities where we'll see the best and the brightest of each university put forward their ideas. The constant theme I see is that quite often great inventions or great innovations will come to those investment committees. Everybody can see the opportunity that the inventors created, but in order to back it, we need to see that there's a depth in the team, because there's never a team of one. So I would encourage all young researchers who've got great inventions or great innovations to collaborate with other people around them, find other team members who can provide skill sets that you don't have, because if you're going to get venture capital to back you, they're only going to back you if they can see that it's a fully formed team. And that's just the most critical thing. Make sure you've got a good, doesn't have to be big, but a good team around you to support you on your journey, because you're going to need it.
I think it's a very unique position, because when it comes to innovation, people are very ambitious and wants to be the highlight of that innovation. So it's very hard to team up, especially when they have an innovation.
The best of our portfolio of companies, and again, pick biotechnology, are the ones where the scientist has reached a conclusion that they need to bring in a professional CEO to drive the success of whatever they've invented. And it's just a step change. It just makes it much easier to attract capital, much easier to attract support, much easier to actually achieve the goals of the founder. Mm-hmm. The companies I see that struggle most are the ones that don't do that. And particularly in deep tech, where somebody's come up with a great device or a great invention and they want to hang on to that passionately, mm-hmm. but hang on to it passionately quite often means that they're not going to get the support from markets. So it's a really critical ingredient in success, and I would just encourage young founders to just think about that, right, and make sure you've actually got the right support around you to make sure that whatever you're doing is going to stand the best chance of getting backed and being successful. Because you won't be able to do this without capital support in markets. It just won't happen.
Mm-hmm. And finally, to wrap things up, let's play a game. Sure. If you had a magic wand or a magic button that could instantly make one very stubborn world issue disappear, something so massive and complex that even today's incredible deep tech can't actually quite crack it up, what would that problem be and why?
So it's a really interesting thing. So I'll go back to what I would like to see would be something that actually solves for the human mind problems, because they're so far-reaching, for us as a species. And there are so many incredible technologies that are coming out in brain technology now, but they're underinvested in globally in terms of health. So I just look at it and I say the one thing I'd love to see would just be a greater attention in terms of some of these great innovations getting better funded, better supported. Because if you can solve for the human mind, you can solve so many things, right? You can solve so many things. It's all disease, all climatic problems, all of that. The solutions sit in the brain, and there are so many great opportunities to solve these things with just a little bit more focus on the brain.
How close do you think we are?
A lot closer than what people think. I think quantum computing is a lot closer than what people think. I think quantum computing will be a step change, as AI is proving, just on a different scale. a completely different scale. Now, when I say close, it could be a decade away. But what you know is that it will happen, and when it happens, there'll be a step change in everything. Who would have thought that applied AI would now be accelerating drug discovery 5 years ago? And yet here we are today with AI being used to shortcut discovery of some incredibly powerful drugs. So I just think we're so lucky because we sit on this cusp of a global revolution in health technology and technology generally, and we can't see it. So we want to be there.
Thank you very much, Guy, for coming us and actually sharing this insightful field of information.
No, look, I really appreciate it. And as I say, I'm very passionate about this. My team are passionate about this. And again, I just remind everybody, it's Australia. We kick outside, the goals. Very few people understand that, how many people use Wi-Fi? Wi-Fi was an Australian invention, right? Like, seriously. We can do a lot of things in this country. We just need to get a bit better focus.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.